Tonight's nightmares aren't legends, they're warnings. Because these three true American terrors, a house that breathes when you don't, a ghost hitchhiker who never made it home, and something crawling inside the walls of an apartment basement, will follow you long after this video ends. Story 1. The house that counted BREATHS. When 28-year-old Sarah Delaney moved into the two-story colonial house in a suburb outside Cleveland, Ohio, she believed she'd finally caught a break in life. After years of non-stop double shifts as a paramedic, sleepless nights, trauma scenes that replayed in her mind at random moments, and the crushing loneliness that came with being constantly on call, the idea of a quiet, affordable home felt miraculous. The landlord barely charged anything, claiming he simply wanted the place occupied. And Sarah, exhausted and eager to live somewhere that didn't smell like bleach and old carpet, signed the papers without hesitation. The house seemed normal enough at first. A wide front porch, peeling white paint, a gnarled oak tree in the front yard that looked like it had witnessed every decade of the last century. Inside, the air felt still, too still, but she told herself that was simply because no one had lived there for a while. The silence after years of city apartments was almost soothing. She unpacked, made dinner, and collapsed into bed without a second thought. It should have been an easy night. Instead, she woke at 3:09 a.m. not to a noise, no door creak, no rattling window, but because she felt like someone was watching her. The room was cold, far colder than the hallway had been earlier, yet the thermostat hadn't changed. She lay there, eyelids heavy, trying to steady her breathing. That's when she heard it. A faint exhale, barely audible but definitely not hers. She held her breath. The sound continued, long, slow, as if something in the room was breathing in sync with her, yet slightly out of rhythm. She sat up and flicked on her bedside lamp. Nothing, just her packed moving boxes, the cracked ceiling, the shadows cast by the lamplight. She eventually convinced herself it was a dream, or maybe she had been hearing her own breath and confusing it in her half-asleep state. But the next night, it happened again. And again. Always at 3:09 a.m., always the same faint breathing that didn't match her own. Sarah decided it had to be the old ventilation system. Houses made noises all the time. Pipes groaning, wood contracting, drafts moving through unseen cracks. But when she crouched beside the vent to listen during the day, she heard nothing. Not even airflow. The furnace didn't switch on once, despite the house being cold enough that she could see her breath. She mentioned it to her neighbor, Mrs. Talbot, a polite but anxious woman in her 60s, who always seemed on the verge of telling Sarah something important but never actually did. When Sarah casually mentioned the nightly breathing, the woman's face went bone white. "You hear it already," she whispered. Sarah asked what that meant, but Mrs. Talbot immediately clammed up, claiming she had said too much, and hurrying back inside her own house. That only made everything worse. For the next 2 nights, instead of a faint echo, the breathing grew more intense, closer, louder, as if something in the walls was inhaling deeply beside her bed. Finally, Sarah couldn't take it anymore. She ripped open the vent in her bedroom. There was nothing inside. No dead animals, no debris, no dust buildup. But on the metal interior, charred marks stretched across the bottom edge, like heat had once scorched it from the inside out. The same type of marks she found the next morning in the upstairs hallway. Faint black streaks on the floorboards, barely visible unless the light caught them at the right angle. They looked like old scorch marks, or like someone had been dragged across the floor after burning alive. Uneasy, Sarah confronted the landlord. At first, he brushed it off, insisting the house was perfectly fine. But when she mentioned scorch marks, he stiffened. His tone shifted. He spoke slower, more careful, and eventually he admitted there had been an accident here years ago. A tenant died in the house due to a faulty furnace. Except that didn't make sense. The furnace that currently stood in the basement was only 10 years old. The landlord had replaced it long before the tenant died. So how did he die from furnace fumes? Sarah demanded, if the furnace he supposedly died from hadn't existed yet. The landlord didn't answer. He simply ended the call. That night, Sarah didn't sleep at all. She lay awake, listening, waiting, heart racing. At 3:09 a.m., the breathing returned, but this time it wasn't faint. It was inches from her face. She felt a rush of ice-cold air on her cheek, as if something exhaled directly onto her skin. She scrambled backward, accidentally kicking over her nightstand. The lamp fell and shattered. For a brief moment, the room went pitch black, and in that darkness she heard something whisper, "You're next." The lights flickered back on. No one stood in the room, but Sarah noticed something horrifying on her shirt, small black marks like soot or ash, smeared across her chest as though invisible hands had grabbed her. She ran. She didn't pack, didn't look back, didn't care about the lease or her deposit. She fled into the night and didn't return until morning with police officers. They searched the house but found nothing unusual, except one thing. All the scorch marks on the floorboards were darker, fresh, as though whatever left them had moved through the house recently. The house remains vacant today. Neighbors swear they hear faint breathing when they walk past at night. And always at 3:09 a.m., the windows fog from the inside, as though something in the house is still breathing, or waiting. Story 2. The Midnight Visitor of Route 47. 15-year trucking veteran Evan Mercer, born and raised in Kansas, was the type of driver who prided himself on never flinching at anything the highway threw at him. Bad weather, drunk drivers, mechanical failures, midnight hallucinations caused by exhaustion. He handled them all. Nothing scared him, until one delivery changed everything. The shipment wasn't unusual. Crates of industrial equipment headed to a small town near the Arkansas border. But the route required passing through the barren stretch of Route 47. The road had been abandoned for decades after a chemical plant exploded and poisoned the soil. Locals avoided it, claiming the land was wrong, and even GPS systems tended to redirect drivers away. But Evan was tired, behind schedule, and didn't believe in superstition. The shortest route was the best route. He reached Route 47 at 12:58 a.m., when the night was at its deepest point. The sky above him was so black it looked like the stars had gone out. Even the moon was hidden behind heavy clouds. His headlights cut across the desolate landscape, dead trees twisted like skeletal hands, dry dirt scarred by long-forgotten destruction, and silence thicker than anything he'd ever experienced. Around 1:11 a.m. he saw her, a woman in a white dress standing directly in the center of the lane. Evan slammed the brakes, tires screeching, the truck's trailer jackknifing dangerously. He honked the horn. No reaction. The woman didn't flinch, didn't turn her head, didn't move at all. When the truck finally stopped inches from her, Evan jumped out, cursing and shaking. But by the time his boots hit the ground, she was gone. Not walking away, not running, not hiding, just gone. The flat, empty land left no place where she could have disappeared. On the asphalt, however, Evan noticed something chilling, a trail of wet footprints leading nowhere. The ground around him was bone dry. It hadn't rained in weeks. Yet these prints looked as though someone had climbed out of a river minutes earlier. He felt nauseous. Something in his instincts screamed, "Get back in the truck." He listened. Within minutes, he was driving again, gripping the wheel so hard his knuckles turned white. He kept checking his mirrors nervously, breath quickening. Then he saw her again. But this time, she wasn't on the road. She was in his rearview mirror, sitting in the passenger seat directly behind him. Her skin was deathly pale, her lips blue, her hair dripping as though she'd drowned. Her dress hung limply from her shoulders, soaked and clinging to her frame. Water pooled on the seat beneath her, though Evan felt nothing wet. He froze. The woman slowly lifted her head. Her eyes, milky white, lifeless, snapped open. Evan swerved wildly, narrowly missing a rusted guardrail. The truck skidded to the shoulder and stalled. Shaking violently, Evan leapt out of the cab, stumbling backwards onto the dirt. He turned back to look at the truck. Its interior was filling with water, flooding up to the dashboard, swirling violently as though something was drowning inside. Evan watched the impossible scene unfold, powerless. Within seconds, the water rose to the windshield and then vanished entirely. One blink and the cab was dry again. No woman, no water, no sign anything out of the ordinary had occurred. At dawn, rattled to his core, Evan stopped at a diner off the highway. The waitress, noticing his pale face and trembling hands, asked what was wrong. When he mentioned Route 47, she stiffened. Then she told him about Grace Collar, a hitchhiker who vanished along that road in the 1970s. A trucker had picked her up late at night, then crashed into a flooded river after swerving to avoid a train that wasn't there. The man escaped. Grace didn't. Her body was never recovered. Ever since, drivers reported seeing her at night, always drenched, always silent, always appearing in vehicles heading along the path of her final ride. Some believed she was trying to warn drivers of danger. Others believed she wanted company at the bottom of the river. Evan never drove long haul again, and Route 47 remains empty after dark, except for the woman in white who still looks for a ride. Story 3. The unseen in apartment. When 33-year-old software designer Marcus Hale relocated to Portland, Maine. He didn't know much about the city beyond its coastal charm and thriving tech scene. He found an apartment in a building called Brighton Court, a faded brick complex built sometime in the 1950s. It wasn't fancy, peeling paint, flickering hallway lights, a creaky elevator, but it was affordable and close to his new job. The apartment itself was decent, a little outdated but functional. The only downside was the basement laundry room, which all tenants seemed to avoid. When Marcus asked the old woman in apartment 11A why she never used it, she only said, "The basement moves when it's hungry." She laughed afterward, but the look in her eyes wasn't a joke. At first, Marcus ignored the comment. He was a rational man, logical, grounded, not prone to superstition. Yet every time he walked past the basement door, he noticed it sat slightly open. Not fully, just enough to be unsettling. He shut it every day, and every morning it would be open again. On his first night doing laundry, the air in the basement felt wrong. Too heavy, too still. He heard faint scratching under the concrete floor, followed by a whisper, not coming from a single direction but echoing throughout the room. The lights flickered, humming loudly. He dropped the basket of clothes, then something moved behind the dryers. A shape, tall, thin, wrong. Its limbs bent sharply, unnaturally, joints positioned where no joints should exist. Its head tilted almost 90 degrees as though its neck had broken decades ago. Marcus froze as it whispered his name. Not once, but in a layered chorus of voices, as though many things were speaking through one mouth. He bolted up the stairs and slammed the basement door shut, heart racing, sweat breaking across his forehead. He told himself it was a trick of the lights, exhaustion, stress from moving, anything but what he thought he saw. But the scratching began in his apartment walls that same night, soft at first, then louder. Then something whispered his name from inside the ventilation system. He couldn't sleep. On the third night, he set up a night vision camera aimed at his bedroom door. When he reviewed the footage the next morning, his heart nearly stopped. The door slowly creaked open at 3:41 a.m., but nothing entered. No, something did. A long, distorted shadow stretched across the floor toward his bed, creeping closer with each passing second. Then the video cut to static. Marcus fled the building that same morning. Brighton Court condemned the basement weeks later after multiple residents reported the same entity. No one ever found a crawl space, tunnel, or passage where something could hide. Yet every few months, new tenants claim someone whispers their names through the walls. Suggestions: these 3 American nightmare stories, the breathing house in Ohio, the drowned hitchhiker of Kansas, and the basement entity in Maine, remind us that the world is full of places where reality grows thin, where the dead linger, where old tragedies seek new victims, and where the boundary between the living and the unseen is far more fragile than we want to believe. If you ever sense something watching you from the dark, trust your instincts. If you feel breathing that isn't yours, leave. And if a place feels hungry, don't stay long enough to find out what it feeds on. If you enjoyed these expanded nightmare stories, subscribe to the channel, like the video, Leave a comment sharing your own creepy encounter, and share this video with someone who loves chilling horror tales. Your support keeps the darkness alive. See you in the next nightmare.